Hello, everyone. I'm here with the wonderful Luke Story and Alyson Charles. And I met you guys here at the house, right? It was the first time I met. I met Luke once, and then I met the two of you together. And I was just telling them, and I'll share with the listeners, how I had this, inspiration, this immediate thought to interview couples. I was sitting with a friend of mine, Jen and Pat, and then I thought, I want to learn more about their relationship. I want to learn more about, some other relationships that I've experienced. And then you guys came to mind right away, and you were super down to let me ask you all the questions. So I'm so grateful for that. And I know that Luke, you have an amazing podcast. Alyson, you have an amazing podcast. Will you please just share briefly, what it is that you inspire the world to do on a daily basis, so that way the listeners can get to know you more? That'd be awesome.
Excellent. Go ahead.
My podcast is called Ceremony Circle, and it really is a reflection of my devotion to the shamanic path and the spiritual path, and just connecting, trying to bring people together and highlighting global unity and kindness and compassion and all the different methods and ways that one can expand into their own fullest power and expression here on earth. And essentially it's like the underlying current of it is trying to not put people into small boxes if you have a tendency of doing that, and if you're someone who lets yourself be put into too small of a box, like just basically busting out of any boxes, because we're these infinite, incredible beings with infinite possibilities in terms of ways that we can evolve. And that's what we're here on earth doing, is learning and growing. So I bring on spiritual teachers and other shamans from all over the world to share their personal journeys and their rituals and traditions that have allowed them to expand into their highest potential. So in a nutshell, that's what Ceremony Circle is.
Wow. One thing I want to share really quick that I appreciate about you, Alyson, is when you were doing the interview with Drew, I loved how you were like, let's bring the tool and let's meditate, or let's do it right now. And I thought that was so beautiful. It's like, let's not just share the tool, but let's embody it. Let's be it. Let's bring that presencing into this very moment. And that's such a beautiful gift. So go stalk Alyson.
Yeah, thank you for picking up on that and sharing that, because that is, you honed in on the biggest key. Anyone who's listened to any of the episodes, I talk about embodiment every single episode, and the guests who I want to have on, that's the number one requirement, is are they healthily integrated, and do they walk the talk? Are they embodied? And it's not about being perfect, because we all have stuff, even many, many years deep on the shamanic path. I'm still noticing like little pockets where there's a little bit more tending of healing to do, or a little bit bigger way that I can hold an even greater space of unconditional love for others and things like that. So it's not about being perfect, but it is about embodiment. And if someone is out there teaching, do they actually walk the teachings that they share? And so, yeah, that's why at the end of every episode, I have the guest share some sort of ceremonial offering for the listeners to immerse into.
That's so wonderful. Wow. Thank you.
I just like to listen to Alyson talk. It's great. It's so nice to, as you well know, to be in relationship to someone that you just appreciate so much. So it's nice to hear her reflect and to see her new venture. I mean, she has a book coming out and she's done all these other things, but I guess the podcast is kind of the newest and the most passionate venture for her. So it's fun to see it unfold. What I do is I teach and inspire people to heal themselves on all levels. So I help people get back into their body and retain the energy and vitality in their body by becoming sovereign physical beings, so that they have the energy and longevity to complete their soul mission here. And then I help them to connect with the spiritual part of themselves, which is really the only part of ourselves, by finding a relationship with the higher power and cultivating that through the application of spiritual principles. And so I do that through what you know as public speaking, but in age of tyranny we live in is often online speaking, as we're doing now, and through my podcast, The Lifestylist. And I'm just someone who suffered a lot early in life and became very devoted in my mid-20s to just figuring out how the body works, how to heal it, how to keep it healed, and also how to make that connection, and really delving deep into meditation and breath work and all of the practices that help us really connect to the essence of who we are, and to embody consciousness in a way that makes a contribution to those about us, and most of all to ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And what I love too, Luke, is I met you right before I had heard your podcast. And one thing that I just acknowledge and appreciate so much about you is your humility. And you know how humble and present you are, and your just authenticity and your honesty, right? Like and how you share your innermost thoughts, right? That not everyone is just so maybe present to those thoughts all the time, and or openly willing to just share like the way that you do, in your level of transparency. Even just meeting you in person right off the bat, and then also hearing that on your podcast afterwards was just absolutely beautiful and stunning. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you. That's about the highest compliment one could get. You know, I think that being authentic is something that requires a lot of self-love, and also a courage, you know. So it's one thing to be funny or intelligent or a lot of other attributes that I think people would chase after, and I appreciate if I can harness some of those qualities too. But more than anything, it's such a high compliment to be seen as someone who carries themselves with authenticity and vulnerability. And I didn't even know that, because I get that reflection a lot and it feels really good, but I didn't even know that I was that way until people started telling me that. And I think really it's funny, because I've contemplated, it's like, why do people always say that? I mean, isn't everyone like that? And then it brings me back to really, I'm a former highly committed drug addict, and it's been a couple decades since I was set free from that. Thank God, praise God. But one of the requirements that is imperative to someone escaping addiction or alcoholism is the application of self-honesty. You really have to face yourself and really do a lot of shadow work in order to overcome that, because it's those nooks and crannies within our subconscious and our past and traumas and all of that that really keep us locked into the need to self-medicate. And so the first order of business was like getting very real with myself. And it's funny because that just is so embedded in my day-to-day awareness, and it's just how I operate in the world. And it's nice to have that reflected and seen as a quality. To me, it's not so much out of virtue, it's really born out of necessity, but you know, I'll take the accolades nonetheless.
Wow. That's so awesome. It inspires me to want to be more like that. And so I'm sure it does other people all the time, you know, and then the freedom that comes from that level of honesty. So thank you for sharing that. And I've also, Drew told me, actually, he's like, they have the most beautiful love story. And he like told me some of it, and this was a while ago. And then last night at dinner, I was like, I can't wait to hear their love story tomorrow. So I would love for us to start with that. And I know that you guys are engaged, and when did you get, so just tell us all, give us the good stuff. How did you meet? You know, you can share together or each share whatever you want.
We have different versions of all this stuff.
We'll hear both versions.
Her memory actually recounts actual events, where mine was sort of a broad stroke at times. I'll give you my experience with Alyson, and then perhaps she can share her perspective on it. But I did an event in New York City some 4 years ago. So this is where she comes in handy, because she'll actually remember the date. But I was participating in this event. I was a moderator on a panel for a consciousness event called Luke, and I was getting all the media materials before the event, and I saw her little headshot and bio on one of the marketing graphics or something. I was like, oh my God, that girl is hot. Wow. Can't wait to meet her. And then saw her speak. She wasn't on my panel, but she was on one of the other panels. And I was just really enamored with her energy and the way that she looked. Obviously, she's a quite a looker. And but the funny thing is,
Looker.
but the funny thing is at that time, I was celibate and I was not dating, not flirting. I was totally disengaged from females. I had zero contact with women outside of work or anything that was necessary, because I really had to go in and do some deep work around my propensity to enter into dysfunctional relationships. And so I was taking a pause, but I couldn't help but notice, because I have the male biology that makes me notice. And anyway, I ended up interviewing a number of people that were present and speakers at that event and whatnot. And so I kind of just made the rounds of New York City and interviewed all the spiritual teachers and yoga teachers, meditation teachers, et cetera, that I can find, including many people that were presenting at the event. And she was one of them. Someone connected me to her, and she agreed to do a podcast. And I went and met her in Midtown Manhattan. And we ended up having just a really beautiful exchange. Funny thing, it ended up being episode 111, which I guess to some people has some significance. But I remember during that conversation, I mean, obviously I thought she was pretty, but it was, I think the gift was in the fact that I wasn't seeing her as someone to potentially date or trying to flirt with her or get her approval or like play any kind of games in that way. It was just like, I want to do a podcast with this person because they seem to be popular. I like her energy. She's got some great things to say and has obviously done a lot of work on herself. But there was a moment, and speaking to your, the authenticity piece, there was a moment during that conversation wherein I was starting to share some of my journey about the pain that I experienced in relationships, and that the fact that I was so shut off from intimacy in many ways, and was so terrified of being vulnerable and really opening my heart. And I was kind of in the middle during that period of a huge awakening and transformation as a result of the time I was taking off. And there was a moment in which I just was led to kind of be very vulnerable, and she held space in such a beautiful way that it was, it really left an imprint on me, that there was something really special about her. And not only about her, but the degree to which I felt safe to just be very real and be myself with her. And she was just so present to that moment that we shared in that particular part of the conversation. And I think in a way, or maybe all the way, that was the moment that I began to fall in love with her. But because I was so committed to my path at that particular time, I didn't really give that much energy. I just thought, wow, what an incredible woman, and then we remained friends for the next 3 or so years, and would chat here and there. We'd see each other at other events at which we were speaking, et cetera. And, we had short exchanges. We didn't spend a lot of deep quality time together for various reasons, but I always just thought she was really cool. I was like, that girl's really cool. And I always had in the back of my mind that, man, if she ever moves to LA, it's on, But I had challenging experiences with long distance relationships. So when I did come out of that cave period of, deep work, and started putting together kind of a logical, healthy plan to start dating and get back into a relationship, she was kind of on my back burner list because she lived in New York. And it was just like, I don't want to get myself into that kind of situation again. But I did have a crush on her, and she was in my, like saved Instagram photos, like, don't forget about this one, Luke, when you're ready, or if she ever moves to LA. And then as it turned out, over the course of those few years, she was, unbeknownst to me, making moves to gradually get closer to LA, because she'd been bi-coastal and would visit a lot, but visiting didn't meet my criteria for a committed relationship. So long story short, and she can perhaps tie the bow on the rest of the gift of our story. But long story short, she calls me one day and or texts me or whatever it was, and said, hey, you in LA, let's meet up. I'm going to be out there. And I said, oh, you coming out here for a gig? Because she'd come out and do, film videos and things like that. And she said, no, I'm actually coming out to put roots down. I'm moving to LA. And I was like, oh shit. And I had been in a relationship for a period of time in between the celibacy period. So I just gotten out of a relationship 2 or 3 months
And I
before
had
that.
no idea. And I was like really happy for him that he had gotten in that relationship, because in the times that we had hung out, and I considered him a good friend, I knew, and I was celibate too, for almost 5 years. So when I heard that he had gotten into this relationship, I was celebrating that, and at one point when he hit up against a couple of bumps, he actually reached out to me, and I gave like very impartial advice, like to support the health of that relationship. I was really happy for him, and I did not know that it had ended when I texted him to say, like, I'm moving out here, let's grab tea. I had zero knowledge of that.
Yeah, that's true. That speaks to your integrity also. You know, I'm sure many people have had the experience where you're interested in someone who's in a relationship and you'll kind of check in and like hope that it doesn't work out so you can
Mhm.
move in. I mean, I've done,
I want to
yeah,
rethink this, but I was like, well, like try
you,
this,
you were impartial and your advice was very sound. That was at the very beginning of that relationship. But anyway, so she said she was coming out, and to me that was like, ooh, green light. You know, I finally have the opportunity to pursue her, and we went out to coffee, and I proceeded to give her quite a shock when I revealed my feelings toward her because
On the first
I'm
date?
no, it was just a coffee date. She
Coffee
didn't
date.
know it was a date. It was just really meeting for coffee, but I'm just kind of a straight shooter. You know, I'm not like a big
Awesome.
flirter. If I'm interested in someone, I'm just like, hey, I'm interested in you. Let's go out. You feel the same way? No, great. Yes, great. How's Tuesday? You know? So
Mhm.
yeah, we went to coffee, and I'll never forget. And her story of it is probably funnier than mine, but I knew when I went there, I was like, I need to be honest. Going back to that honesty piece, I'm not going to be around her and we're both single and everything's on the up and up. I'm not going to be around her and be fake and act like I'm not interested in her. Even though I didn't feel a big rush to get back into a relationship because I was still kind of processing the one which I had just exited. But yeah, we're eating lunch, and I was like, hey, you know what? Kind of interrupted the conversation. Said, you know what? I don't know if you have any idea of this or I've ever shared it, but I've always been really attracted to you, and I would love to take you out on a date. And she just kind of froze.
My
And
brain kind of shut down because
yeah,
I wasn't sure that I was hearing correctly, because we had been friends for over 3 years and nothing at all had ever been said. It was always just so professional and just so light, and no inkling or threads at all on either of our behalf entering into these waters. And he repositioned himself. It was a big, like, he had shared things about his life, and then he literally moved to the other side of the table, got situated in another chair, and I was like, what is going on, what is he doing? And then that's when he shared this. To me, it was, well, I don't want to call it a secret, but I just had zero idea, so my brain was glitching a bit, and I remember thinking, did he just say that? Like, am I making things up? Did he just say what I think he said? And so I think I got a little bit frozen.
yeah, and it was a great moment. And what ensued in the coming weeks was really probably best described as a bond which was directed by a force other than our own, and things just took turns that were totally unpredictable, and for me, especially outside of whatever linear plan I had outlined to enter into any relationship, which was to take it very slow and date around a bit and really take my time and be thoughtful about it. And we started going on a couple dates, and it was going well. We got along well. I mean, we always felt so comfortable around one another, and I think the value in that was that we already had established a friendship, and so I understood to a degree at least the level of character with which she carried herself, and that was really the primary requirement for me, was someone who had really worked on themselves and was mentally, spiritually healthy, and someone who was really virtuous, and virtuous but sexy. How do you
Mhm.
find that, but it does exist, guys. Any guys listening or women listening, I'm sure there are virtuous men who are hot.
Mhm.
But yeah, we went on a couple really kind of formal dates, took her out to a nice dinner and really courted her in an old school way, which I really enjoy. And apparently she does too. And
Yeah, that
then,
was nice. He took the initiative, and he took the leadership role. And I don't know if you can relate, but, is a very strong woman who has accomplished a lot in my life. And I'm very strong with my career and entrepreneurship. It's easy for me to fall into having to be the leader, even when it comes to relationships with men. And that default like ability in me just typically comes alive. And in my previous relationships, I think it was large in part, that played a role in the demise of it, because the roles were just like kind of all off, and I was having to be in the masculine and the leader way for everything, and it was exhausting. And so when he came in and yeah, was really taking the initiative, and yeah, in so many different ways, showing examples of that, I was like, oh my God, I felt like I could breathe for the first time. I was like, finally, a man who knows how to do this stuff.
it was hard earned. It's funny you say that it's exhausting to be in the masculine role. And I've often observed, and I don't know this to be the truth, but when a man is embodied in their masculine, it does take a bit of exertion to kind of hold space in that way. And I've always wondered if that's has anything to do with why men tend to die sooner, because it's like, if a man is embodied in his role and as a conscious man, especially, because then you're holding space for the etheric kind of spiritual, emotional, feeling-based self and exchange, that it does require a lot of energy to hold it down and, do planning and be accountable and make sure that things are intact and done with integrity. And I've thought, at times I was like, God, I think men just get worn out,
Well, it's a lot to think about, and all the things that I just thought were normal back in the day in previous relationships. Like I was the one handling all the bills, all the organization, everything, all the trips, all the just like at the helm in every category. And like obviously I contribute money to the bills, but he's the one that's like making sure that things are tended to, and like that kind of those tasks and duties are handled. And I honestly didn't know that men knew how to do that stuff, because my exes were just like, oh, that's 2 months late, oh well, let's pay it next month. And I'm like, no, 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 it's not how this works. So anyways,
if we would have dated in well, I guess when I was in my 20s, you would have been a teenager. So that wouldn't have worked for a number of reasons. But I mean, it was the ability to do that. And, I'm still working on it, I'm sure, at 50. But I mean, I did not used to be that way.
well,
And,
yeah, I mean, at one point he technically didn't have his own home, but I love, even when he was like, quote unquote, homeless. I mean, he was living in someone's garage, but he technically was homeless. However, my favorite part of that story is that you were mindful of it, and he was trying. He's like, well, while I'm homeless and not paying, rent, I'm going to try to work down some of your debt. And like, so he was homeless, but paying off like credit cards and stuff. And I just find that story so hilarious.
Yeah, I was homeless for a
Such
year.
a mindful homeless man.
I was homeless. And when I say homeless, I mean, I wasn't in a shelter under the freeway, but I was homeless. I was living in a freezing garage in Silver Lake, covered in spiders every night. It was not fun. But yeah, I had my shit was so disheveled in my life that I ended up with no place to live. And
that was before you were sober, right?
that was after, actually.
Well, not long after.
Yeah, no, not long after. Yeah. There was not a lot of difference, yeah, you can take the drugs out of the man, but there's still a lot of behavioral problems that follow that need to be dealt with. But yeah, I did. I think I had the money to get an apartment at one point. I just thought, you know what, I'm in such terrible credit card debt that I did elect. I stayed homeless for a year fairly voluntarily just to try and get myself out of that hole. Yeah. So thank God it was a wise decision. And I actually had a job. I was working as an assistant fashion stylist. So I'm like, during the day, I'm going off and working with all these celebrities on shoots and music videos and stuff like that in Hollywood. And then at night, I'm going to sleeping in a garage,
Wow.
driving my 95 Nissan Maxima around Hollywood, pulling into Beverly Hills, going up and down Rodeo Drive with, $100,000 worth of clothes. Sometimes I remember one time I was doing a job with Ozzy Osbourne, and they had me go around and pick up all his fine jewelry. He wears all these big diamond crosses and stuff. And I think the insurance limits were like, maybe it was $2 million per vendor. And I went to 2 vendors. So I'm rolling around like in my hoopty with $4 million worth of diamond jewelry, and I'm homeless living in a garage, just the dichotomy of so many experiences like that.
But back to answer your question, we went on 3 dates. We're happy to give more details because they are somewhat or very interesting in terms of what occurred. Because like he said, it was not us doing any of this. God got us, opened up this river for us, and we were just trying to keep up. And then not long, like very quickly after the desert date, that involved a TP sacred ceremony, I then moved cross country with my cat to move in with him. And then not long after that, we got engaged. So we definitely were on this totally unexpected lightning fast track.
Wow.
It's interesting though, the fast track, and this was hard for me to reconcile at the time. And in the very beginning, I don't know what it was in time, first couple of weeks, or just when it first kind of became a thing, there were parts of me that thought, oh man, you're following these old patterns, you got to be careful, Luke, you're blowing it here. You're going to end up in the same situation you've been in many times, which was painful for all parties included. But the fast track of our relationship, and I think when I was alluding to the fact that it was being guided by something other than ourselves, or in cooperation perhaps with something other than ourselves, a higher order of things, was that it wasn't fast in the old way, which was fast for me, which is like go on one date, have chemistry, have sex, hopefully immediately. And then if that's going okay, try and cobble together the rest of the relationship, on a really sort of a foundation that was fueled on neurochemistry, right? And hormones rather
Dopamine.
rather than really getting to know someone. So the fast track for us was this different sort of surrendered action, trusting in God's plan for us, sort of fast. At least that was my subjective experience of it, rather than it's going fast like we didn't have sex for months. We were already in a committed relationship before we ever had sex. What was fast was the committed relationship part. It was like, oh, we're together now. And that happened on the 3rd date. That was so out of my realm of possibility, and the constructs that I had with all the best intention constructed to try and protect myself and other people from getting in these crazy codependent, love avoidant, love addicted, trauma-based cycles.
Yeah.
Their relationships, more than anything, they're just a pattern that's being played out cycle after cycle. And so the speed with which our relationship and our bond came together was so unorthodox, and it was so strangely unfamiliar to me too. It was just like, what is happening?
It was super mystical. And anytime you're in that space where there's that very potent real current of divinity and goddess formulation happening, it's very you can't even put words to it, but for me it was so clear that was what was going on. So I was just like kind of in the river with my hands up. We're both very skilled with surrender. That to us was the biggest defining moment in both of our lives that changed the course of our lives. Is in my own way with my divine intervention, spiritual awakening, I had my surrender moment. And with him finally going into rehab, he had a very God experience involving surrender. So it was a little more challenging for him. He did really good with it. He didn't fight it. I was like all in the river, just like, woo, I trust this. This is great. And he was in the river, but more like this, and like kind of looking around and kind of like, questioning a little bit more, understandably so, because of his history.
Yeah. And the 3rd date on which we became a couple, it was over a weekend, and the desert experience she was alluding to was a peyote ceremony. And that was my first experience with that particular medicine. And I don't know that this would have happened. You never know, because you're hypothesizing to think, well, what if we had gone on another date that weekend instead of doing peyote for 48 hours or whatever? But one of the attributes of that very strange medicine is that it's such a powerful heart opener and connector of people. And it also, I guess most plant medicines and things are this way, but this one in particular, for me at least, the way that my body and being experiences it is like a truth serum. I was still very much in control of my faculties and intellectually very present to the whole ceremony and everything that was going on. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm just high and I'm like falling into a relationship. It was very alert, very awake, but my heart was really open and there was no way to evade the truth that was being revealed. And that truth was that you two are being guided by a benevolent intelligence beyond yourselves. And there was one critical moment, in fact, where it was a bit of a turning point. After one of the ceremonies, we've been up all night. We went back to our Airbnb and we had what was a little bit of a tough conversation because she revealed some of her feelings around things that had happened during that weekend. And
just small important note, I had been given 3 things. The medicine spoke to me in that ceremony and told me 3 specific things that I needed to address with him. And none of them were easy or fun topics. And I was just like, I mean, I think you sense my soul enough, Rebecca, that like I live by the calls, so when I'm told by God, Goddess to do something or say something, or by, the highest intelligence within peyote and the spirit of peyote to do something, I do it. I listen and live those calls and instructions. So I was just like, oh no, I have to have this conversation. So later that night we were exhausted, obviously. And then when he got out of the shower, I was like, please, I was worried he would come into the room and say like, I've just got to go straight to bed. And I knew I had to bring this conversation up. So thankfully he got into the bed and said, hey, you didn't share in the sharing circle today. Why not? And I was like, well, I didn't share because it was highly personal things about you and or us. And I didn't know that would be appropriate to do. So, but thank you for asking. Let's talk about it now. So the way that we really officially got into a relationship, again, it was through these other divine forces and their communications and energies with us, because I didn't know. I thought that might be the end of things, bringing up this uncomfortable stuff. But that was actually the moment that brought us together.
yeah, and that was a really defining moment for me, I think, too, because it was an opportunity for me to really trust in spirit. And I had to really put a lot of effort into surrendering the ideas that I had around what a relationship was supposed to look like, how it's supposed to start, what makes it healthy or dysfunctional, all of these things that I've been working so hard. I mean, I was very committed for the past few years prior of really trying to figure this piece out, because it was something that so dramatically eluded me. And there was a real turning point moment after that conversation. It was made abundantly clear to me that she was there for it. She was just like, hey, I'm here. My heart's open. I'm receptive to this experience with you. Where are you? And it was like, shit, where everything in the intellect was trying to, I mean, I guess this is kind of the way the male brain works sometimes too, but it's like, it was just also illogical. It's like, wait, no, this isn't the plan. This is not how this is supposed to work. I had really built this framework or a blueprint really for how I thought it was supposed to go, because I so desperately wanted to do it right. And I didn't want to hurt other people and I didn't want to hurt myself anymore. And there was a real turning point of surrender where I had kind of a night to sleep on it after that conversation. And the next morning and I had said, yeah, okay, let's give this a shot. That was kind of how the day ended. And in the morning.
Well, but I had to keep interjecting because I think some of the funniest moments, like some of the ones that he's jumping over a little bit. So we had this chat And then when he said, you know, let's give this a shot, then all of a sudden I got a little nervous. I was like, oh wait, like, oh no, it got really real. And so then I was like, how about we sleep on it tonight and see how we feel in the morning, you know? So we were in this funny little dance. But then yes, the next morning, when he came over to me in the living room, I was, you know, I wasn't like nervous. I just in a state of full acceptance. I was just like, how are you feeling about things now? And we both were at the same place of like, let's do this.
And that moment the next morning for me was the jumping off point. That was like, do you really trust God, or do you want to take the reins and do it your own way? And that was like a real, you know, it was the cliff moment of like, okay, God damn it, I hope this parachute works, you know. But there was just something in me. There was 51% of me perhaps that was like, you're going the right way. And that 1% was enough for me to just go, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like we get back to town and go like, oh, I think it was the peyote talking, like, oops, my bad. Yeah, we gotta, you know, rethink this, or we would need to date other people and, you know, take our time, or whatever my ideas would have been. But it was in that moment, and it was really scary because of the pain that I had experienced prior. It was like, oh God, man, am I doing the right thing? Because it's so outside of, as I said, the intellectual, the logic of like how things are supposed to go. But to speak to the power of those types of medicines done intentionally with the right set and setting. I always make sure to emphasize that part, because I don't want anyone to think, oh, I'll just go do peyote and all my problems will be solved. Definitely not. But when you're in the medicine space and it's a ceremonial container being held like that, you really are kind of partly in this world and partly in this quantum world where all of the rules of the material plane and you being embodied don't apply. And you're kind of walking in two worlds in the medicine space. And in the part of the world that was not part of my logical framework, there was an intelligence at play that has proven itself to be absolutely legitimate, because this relationship for me has been, I mean, by far one of the greatest gifts of my entire life. And I've been around for a while, you know, and so it's a testament to knowing thyself, of being honest with thyself, and knowing when you're getting in your own way, and having the courage and the faith to step out of the way and just allow the process to take its course, which is what we've done. And yeah, it was an incredible experience, and one I just never in a million years would have ever thought would happen. And I never thought it would happen in the way in which it did.
Yeah. And then after I say this, we'll be quiet because we know we're sharing a 40-minute story and you've only asked us one question, but I'm very hyper aware of these things as a host and interviewer. But I wanted to share, oh shit, what did you just end on? Because it sparked something really important for me.
Of the jumping off point of really being faced with your level of trust.
No.
Walking in two worlds.
No. Oh, crap.
The best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, you said one of, but we'll leave it with the best. No, I don't think that this is it, but I do want to say, like, the deer, the deer power animal was one that entered in right after my awakening many years ago. And deer, one of its many attributes is keeping your heart open, and a gentle heart, and unconditional love, and all things heart related. So it's very interesting for me. The deer energy in medicine has worked for me my whole path. It's been one of my main allies. And then in the sacred Wiratica peyote traditions, it's the sacred blue deer that is the animal, the spirit of this medicine. And so it was just so astounding for me to witness, because I got called to the medicine, you know, long before this. And I've been sitting with this shamanic family for many years before Luke got called into it. And so that's just another divinely important thing that I want to share. It wasn't like we planned this desert ceremony. he happened to say to me on his first date, oh, I'm going to experience your medicine. And he only refers to it as that because it's the one that thus far resonates the deepest for me. And I said, well, who's facilitating? Because I was a little concerned. And then when he told me his connection point into the invitation, I knew it was my same shamanic family. I had flown back to New York. When I asked him the date of the ceremony, that's when he said, why do you want to come? I had never thought of it. So like 2 days after I got back to New York, I got another ticket, flew back across the country for he and I to go out into the desert. And actually the ceremony was completely full and we didn't even
I forgot
know.
about that.
I said to him, there's zero space. The teepee is, like the TP is the TP and it's divinely orchestrated who's to be in there. And there were over capacity. And so I still flew out there and I said, are you okay with me just coming along and staying at the Airbnb? Because there's no room for me. And then enough people exited out of the ceremony. There was one spot and it was mine. So just the spirit of the deer, and there was just so much orchestration to all of this.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. One thing that I just want to highlight, and I love that you guys shared and talked about, that when that night during the ceremony, when you guys were in the Airbnb and you were, sharing something, Allison, that you had those things come up where you had to talk to about it with him and you're like, oh no. And then you did it. And it sounds like it took courage and bravery and openness and open-heartedness. And then it sounds like he was willing to meet you there. And then your system was like, I don't know. And I think it's so important to have that kind of awareness, right? We want this divine love, this presence that's flowing through another human and meeting us. And then it's like, okay, how much are we willing and open to truly embrace that? And I feel like that's such a great question and an example for the people listening to ask themselves, because the truth is it's here, and it's available. And then when you have this human who's willing to, go there with you, it's such a powerful yet, like sometimes a really scary experience where you're like, hang on, like, and then I catch myself sometimes I'll like find some things wrong to like push it away. And I'm like, okay, wait. So thank you for sharing that. And then I have 2 questions. They're kind of big questions and I want to be mindful of time. So I'm going to give you both those questions and then let you guys flow and answer them how you want to. One is, I know you, talked about the trauma cycles, the avoidant, right, the love addiction, and those things that you had experienced in the past. I'm curious if you can, what the difference is now in the relationship, because I'm guessing that maybe some of those tendencies, and I could be wrong, so you can tell me I'm wrong, present themselves, but then they're handled differently, and or do they actually not present themselves? I'm really curious about that. And then let me give you the other question. And the other question is, at what point were you like, okay, I'm ready to be engaged? Because I believe that's a big step, and so I'm curious about that. I know those are loaded questions, but I'll just let you guys have at it.
Well, I do want to start because I haven't, said yet. He's shared a little bit about his tumultuous past with relationships, and I had the same tumultuous past. Like, my spiritual awakening and divine intervention came from being with an ex-fiance for over 16 years in a very karmic, suffrage-filled, at times abusive, highly dysfunctional relationship. And so, and if on my end, the piece that I take responsibility for is the codependency. I did not have, I was not awake yet. From childhood wounding, I think I lacked very much lacking in self-worth, self-love, self-respect, self-honor. So I literally had the most anguishing drop to my knees moment in life via a relationship. Now, it was simultaneously the most miraculous because I then woke up and the veil was lifted and I got snapped out of all the denial that I had been completely encased in for almost 2 decades. But I don't come from a background of like healthy, great relationships. So there was a lot for me to devote to working on. I am someone who does the work. Like, I do not shy away from things. Like, as shadowy, gremlin-y, monstery as things are, I'm like, okay, I feel you back there. I hear you back there. Let's come right here and let's look at you. Let's talk talk to you. Let's get to know you. Let's face you to transmute you and transcend past this. Okay, now there's another blind spot gremlining back here. Okay, and I'm not someone that turns this way from the blind spot. I bring it right here. And it's through that commitment to shadow work and facing all this stuff. And I, being celibate for almost 5 years, I mean, there's a lot to it, but I had to really learn to trust myself, and it took some practice, and it took years of work, and it took many years of being single and almost those 5 years of celibate to get to a place where my self-love and honor had grown really, really high and very embodied. So yeah, by the time you and I got together, it was clear to me that he had put in enough years of work, that he had reached his sovereignty. And the same for me. I'd put in enough years of devoted work that I had reached my sovereignty. So for us, that was the biggest difference. And that's what allows this container to be a complete 180 in almost every category from any previous relationship we've ever had. Because before he reached his sovereignty and before I reached my sovereignty, we were still operating from wounds and pain body and just neuroses and dysfunction threads. And those things were all weaving into the next person we would date or the next relationship and creating another clusterfuck of dysfunction. But sovereignty and sovereignty coming together creates an entirely different orb. And that's the orb that we've been very fortunate to be in. Not to say that it's perfect. We still continue to have like kind of uncomfortable, conversations, to examine things, but it's just totally different. What else do you want to say about all that? I just don't want people thinking like I've had some like glorious, easy stride path with relationships, because it has been a ton of work.
I think like with most areas of personal development and growth, it's generally born out of some type of suffering. I mean, any changes I've made to better myself in any category have usually come because I hit a wall and realized, wow, like this is not working. All of my best ideas got me to right here. Perhaps I should open my mind to learn. And so in terms of the piece with the love avoidant, love addiction thing, it's been really interesting to observe throughout my history in relationship. And I was predominantly, over 90% of the time, I'd say, if you could quantify it, the avoidant one, and just constantly running from intimacy and closeness, and was just terrified to open my heart or be abandoned. I mean, I didn't know this at the time. I just thought like, man, I just want to be free. I ain't going to be tied down by no woman. I mean, that was kind of my attitude earlier in life. But really now it's funny, it's so clearly been illustrated to me that relationship with mom, relationship with dad, in the formative years had certain dynamics and certain things that took place that really created these patterns of familiarity. And so looking back on relationships I had in the past, they would predominantly put me in one of those roles based on the relationship with my parent. Now, all of this was totally unconscious, of course, because who wants to date one of their parents? In my case, especially my dad, it's like just not a thought you want to have. But in terms of the exchange of the dynamic of those relationships, I would say that I was always trying to get out from under the kind of the enmeshment side of things in my relationship with my mom. And, I love my mom. She loved me, and we all grow and change. And I have great relationships with both my parents at this point. But, there was like a sense of being smothered. And so then I would meet women that unconsciously shared those attributes of my mom and of those dynamics where like they wanted more than I did. Right. And as I started to work through and identify that, and I stopped doing that, then there were a couple occasions in which I then had a polarity shift, and I became like the needy one that wanted more, and they were the avoidant one. And I came to realize through ceremony and a lot of inner work that was more the relationship with my dad. He was just emotionally unavailable and had his own stuff going on and was not there in a way that a kid needed at that time in my life. And so I like to say that in relationships, when you meet someone and there's this massive charge and it just feels so right, it's just right. And all your friends are going, dude, slow down. Are you crazy? Like, hang on. Did you notice this about that person and that about that person? Like, wait, and you're like, no, you don't get it. This is the one. This is the one. It's not oftentimes that that person is right. It's that that person is familiar. And so having experienced that and really examined that and really done a lot of self-inquiry around how those dynamics and those imprints from childhood played out in my relationships, it's very interesting to be in a relationship with Alyson where, I mean, I'm sure you have subconscious drives that you're totally unaware of, but our relationship is very healthy and functional and open, you know, as she said, to communication and growth, and even sticky conversations are met with a pretty high level of compassion, empathy, and honesty, that it's like neither one of us is in that role of the avoidant or the addict. I think we equally like our own space about the same amount. We like to be together and just completely immersed in our love for one another about the same. And there's just a really beautiful balance there. And so it's such a glorious thing to have the work that we've each done be exemplified in the dynamic of the relationship. And so that stuff is not really present, although I still notice little twinges myself of abandonment fears, even though like she is so committed to me and so in love with me. I mean, she
I love when he says that he's like, she's so in love with me.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
she
true, but
is.
it's funny to hear him
She
say
is.
it. When I look at him sometimes, he's like, you love me so much. I'm so awesome. I'm like, yes, you are.
Yeah.
It's funny.
But there will still be times I notice I'll be out driving around, and I'm not someone that really keeps a schedule much, as my lovely assistant Andrea, who you I think worked with to make this happen. I'm not a schedule, time, date, calendar kind of guy. I really struggle with the linear formula that we've all agreed to here based on where the sun is at any particular time. So I'll be out driving around and I just lose track of time and I'm gone for hours. I decide, hey, I want to go do this now. I'm just very much a live in the moment, spontaneous guy. And then I'll look at my watch and be like, oh shit, like I just told Alyson I was just running over to the house to check on the workers or something, right? And I should have been back in an hour. And all of a sudden it's like 6 hours later, and I'll feel this like, oh my God, she's probably mad at me. She's probably pissed because like I didn't check in with her, and oh shit, when I get home, you know, I'll have this little thing come up and then I'll call her or text her, or I just show up at home.
I'm at home like writing my book and living my best life and like zero concern.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, hey. And he's like,
Yeah. And I'll kind of tiptoe in, like waiting for the addict archetype or the avoidant archetype to punish me or create conflict or something like that. And it's just not there. It's all really in my head. And this isn't something that drives me or happens very often. It's a very subtle remnant or phantom of my prior psyche. And it's just, there's still something there within the mind that has a familiarity with being in trouble or there being unnecessary conflict because of the way that I operate in my life. So to that piece, there's been a lot of healing in those dynamics, but I think it's worth noting for anyone listening that there's a great practice in just being observed, even as you overcome some of those more obvious glaring defects or patterns that you've managed to outgrow and heal, that there often are these insidious, very subtle little things, and they're fun to play with and observe. And oftentimes I'll even share them with her, and it's embarrassing because I want to be more evolved than that, right? It's like, oh God, like that little thing's still in my mind that like I'm in trouble or she's pissed or something like that. And I'll share it with her, and she just has so much compassion and just helps me work through it. And over time, and she's had her own insecurities too, not so much anymore, but in different ways in the beginning of the relationship. And she would share those with me, and I would just reassure her and console her and let her know that you
I
know,
wish we could tell that story. We can't, but it's hilarious. I'll tell you some other time.
to let, you know, she would share an insecurity perhaps that popped up, and she would know it's totally illogical and it's just an old pattern playing out and showing up and manifesting. And then I would be very present to that and just compassionately listen and love her and just reassure her that the thing she's being reminded of in my behavior is not real. It's literally a ghost of her past that's entering into this dynamic and pretending like it's real for a moment. And then we're able to assuage those fears or those conflicts based on each of our own self-awareness. And that self-awareness comes from practice of building that witness observer perspective, where you within your own sovereignty are able to observe one's own mind and emotions and triggers
Right.
and you know, neurotransmitters and all the things that are at play that cause one to be triggered or spin off into some kind of mini psychosis that then brings conflict into the relationship that's not based in any reality.
The last thing I'll share is I think that's one of the biggest keys for us being able to thrive at the highest level that I feel we do, is both of our capabilities of being in a compassionate space holding realm for the other person when that stuff is occurring. Like one time when we had after we had first gotten together, I was in one of those loops, like my old neural pathways were getting like super ultra triggered. And that stuff, when those, you know, chemicals secrete, like I was already incapacitated with them by them, but I was able to tell him like, this is what's happening for me. So we're having a phone conversation and he's then able to say, like, this is those loops. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do with the loop? And as the loops and of terror and trigger are happening, I'm able to say to him, honestly, now I'm having this thought. And they were all really like shadowy, like not good thoughts. Now this thought is coming up, and he's able to stay in compassion and non-judgment and like literally stay on the phone with me for 2 hours as we're just only talking about this like trigger neuropathway paralysis that I was in. And it took like 2 hours for me to work my body and my brain out of it. But because he knows what's going on, and I, even though I'm in that, I'm still consciously aware of what's going on. Because we have those skills, we can be in that space and work it all the way through until its completion. And then neither one of us is mad or frustrated. We just understand what's going on. And it's not that many people that can probably be in that kind of dance like that.
Yeah, I think it's born in each individual taking responsibility for their own thoughts and feelings, right? There's something that's very common in relationship where you say, well, you make me feel like this, you make me feel like that. When you said this, you made me feel. And it's like, no one can make you feel anything, but your biology and your brain can make you feel things in response to other people, you know? So that takes the egoic defensiveness out of that interaction when one can say, hey, you know what, can I talk to you? Is now a good time? Which, by the way, for men, it's always great to make an appointment so that we're mentally prepared to hold space for you in a compassionate way. Yeah, now's a great time. Well, remember earlier when XYZ happened and then you said XYZ? It's really interesting. When you said that, within my body, I started feeling all of this tension, and I observed my mind starting to think the following thoughts, and those thoughts were emotionally painful to me. Isn't that fascinating? Let's both, as witnesses of this phenomenon, examine it together. That's a totally different conversation than I'm attacking you, you are to blame because I feel the way that I feel. I feel the way that I feel because there's something within me that's being brought up that needs to be healed. That doesn't mean that that other party is necessarily absolved of any responsibility either, because perhaps the other party did do something unconscious or uncaring, unkind, dishonest, etc. But they're not making me feel that way. I'm making me feel that way. So let's both step outside of this bubble and outside of this dance. And as two adults in the room, observe the power of, you want a puppy?
I want a puppy.
There's our first kid.
Cookie.
So in that way, I mean, that's really powerful grist for the mill, spiritually speaking, because it's not only a way for the partnership to evolve and flourish, but it's really deep work to support each other in our own introspection and our own ability to go within and observe these things within ourselves and then get to the root of them, rather than going around and around in a fight trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. You know, it's that pain body that Alyson mentioned is just there. It's craving conflict and drama so badly because that's what that pain body thrives on. The ego thrives on having a positionality to attach itself to, right? So my ego wants to be right so bad that I'm incapable of staying open-hearted and open-minded, that I'll actually, you know, I don't do this much, thank God, but the ego itself will lock on to a position, even though there's no basis of truth in it, just to feel the juice of being victorious, right? And one of the things out of the Course in Miracles, one of the most powerful little principles in there is asking yourself the question, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And in any given conflict, man, I mean, I'm going to choose to be happy the vast majority of time, because the payoff of being right or of winning is so fleeting and really so empty, and is also so inherently selfish and self-centered and not honoring of the person that you or I or we claim to love. If I really love someone, then I'm willing to back down, and perhaps even sometime, if like in a court of law, your case could be proven for you to be correct and be the victor, to even relinquish that juice and just be like, you know what? I see it this way, you see it that way, but like, what is at the core of this? You have two souls that are inside bodies, and those bodies' nervous systems right now are really triggered. Let's move above the body level and go to the soul level and connect there, where unconditional love exists without the impedance of a nervous system nullifying that love.
Wow. Wow, you guys. That's absolutely beautiful. And I love that you kept saying, and I just want to highlight the words compassionate. And I feel like that's so key and so important to, be willing to be selfless. Essentially, I feel like that's what you guys are invited into, and what relationships are invited into, because you get to really let go of yourself, essentially, right? To truly hear the other person. And it's so beautiful that you guys are demonstrating that, and you guys create the container for that for one another. And it's so inspiring to me, and I know it's so inspiring to the listeners. And I'm so grateful for all of your knowledge and for everything that you shared. And if there's any last thing that you want to share for the person who's listening and they're desiring a conscious partnership, any last words that you want to give them, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I would. I think, I mean, all of it's important, right? Because creation designed us for connection, right? Whether that's romantic or not. But I think perhaps the biggest block in us having healthy, fulfilling relationships is the lack of our ability to truly have an intimate relationship with ourselves and to be fulfilled within ourselves. And I think the time that Alice and I individually spent celibate and out of relationship to really examine those patterns and dismantle those patterns is largely the key to the unconditional love that we're able to share, because we have that unconditional love for ourselves and are also intimate enough within our own individual experience that the intimacy that comes together from two souls joining is just a byproduct of the work that's been done on oneself. And that is to embody a sense of worthiness to receive someone else's love, and in the realization that the love you perceive to be from someone else is really just a reflection that you have of the love for and of yourself, right? And so it's not a matter of the pot of gold at the rainbow, to be in the field of love generally in my life, so that I love the interactions that I have with random people that will never develop into any further intimacy, to
You
love.
love your own company.
Yeah, loving your own company. And I think that's really the value in taking some time off, you know, in between relationships, especially ones that were, you know, seemingly more destructive than constructive, right? Is really pausing and not just running off to the next relationship to fill the gaping hole in your soul, and know that there's one puzzle piece that fits that hole, and it's the relationship with spirit, whatever that means to each individual person, you know, a relationship with a God that is personal to you, that you build so that you're never alone. And in that process, it creates space to bring someone else in. And that really serves to nullify that sense of neediness on one end, or control or avoidance on the other end. It's just like, man, there's so much love welling up within myself, and for others, that there's room to share it, and there's room to allow more in. And you find, I think, that like when I look at Alyson and I'm so in love with her, yeah, she's such a unique expression of God, and the love is focused on her like a laser, because she's so able to receive it and is just so deserving of it in her purity. But I recognize that the love that I feel for her is just a love, period, that I embody. And I'm unable to have enough of it left over to give anyone if I don't have it within and for myself.
Wow. So beautiful. It makes my eyes water. Thank you.
I feel complete with everything. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we did. We are starting a venture called Higher Power Couple, and we've been formulating, yeah, different offerings, courses. We're most likely going to give a talk together in August, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what Great Spirit has in store for our union in those capacities as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And they can, you guys will probably post it on I'll give them your Instagram handle. So it's I am Alyson Charles, correct? Is that right?
That's
And then Luke Story
Yeah,
at Luke.
Alyson with the Y and Story with an EY. And then we do have a Higher Power Couple Instagram.
Ah,
Yeah, but we just locked it in there, and you know, a URL and whatnot, as we just moved to Austin, Texas, and are renovating a house and have a lot going on at the moment. But we're both really passionate about sharing this information with people. And so Higher Power Couple will be the vehicle by which we do that in the near future. But people can find us there for now.
wow, amazing. Well, go stalk away. I'll definitely be stalking and reposting, so it'll be easy for them to find it through me. So thank you so much for today, and for your knowledge and your wisdom and your humility and your transparency. And just I honor the work that you have done individually, you know, on your personal journeys, and together as well. And your beautiful sacred relationship is truly inspiring to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so glad we got to the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca.